it down into something a little bit more specific. And, it sort of plays off the mentor thing a little bit, only it's just the opposite. Is, have you ever, and I'd be surprised if the answer is no, had a difficult boss? And I don't say bad boss, but a difficult boss, a difficult supervisor. I have, most of us have.
Yes.
But you can't just walk away. So can you give us an illustration of a difficult boss? Just what were the traits, so people can identify with it? And then how did you manage this?
Yeah, I have, and I would say that I've been fortunate. I've had a lot more amazing bosses than difficult ones. But I would also say I've learned equally from all of them. But sometimes you learn from a boss on what not to do.
And I think that's part of learning, right?
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
good examples, but the good example because you have a foil.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a bad example.
Yeah, and I've been intentional too about capturing those things in a journal so I don't forget. Don't forget how you felt when this person did this, so you don't do it again.
Give us the illustration of of a boss that was really difficult. What was he or she like, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I'll actually share two, because one was so difficult that, and when I explain, it will make sense. But in that situation, I needed to take very specific action. So I'll share that because that happens, and sometimes you got to do it. And I've had another boss who was difficult in the sense that he was so different that I didn't know, and the entire team didn't quite know how to work with him or manage him and what that meant. But the first one that was really, really challenging was very early in my career. And I don't know that I had sort of the tools to really manage that situation well. But it really was also really unfortunate. But it was the first time I faced real discrimination and racism at work for being Latina. I had started this job and I was in a situation where I needed the company to sponsor my visa at the time. And it's a very stressful process if anybody has gone through that. And, a few months had gone by and we were still waiting to kind of hear about the status or whatnot. And we were in a team meeting, and this boss sort of, I think, knew how stressed I was. And in front of everybody, he said, "Don't worry, Tatiana, if you don't get your visa, you can come work at my house." And I didn't know what to say, how to react. Unfortunately, nobody else that was sitting in this room said anything either. And I felt so crushed, so hurt. I wanted to just disappear. I just didn't know, I was 21 years old, my first job. And I just really didn't know how to react. And it was so bad that one of the men in the team after came and checked in on me to make sure I was okay. And I'm I wish you had said something in the meeting, right? And as I processed that a little bit more, I realized that wasn't okay. And that I needed to do something about it and have a conversation with somebody about it. So I actually went to HR and shared the incident. And unfortunately, I would say, I don't know, I think they felt like I wanted to sue them, because what I felt like it was they were protecting the company rather than really being interested in supporting me as I was going through that. And, a few months went by, and of course the situation got worse with this boss, and it was impacting me.
Did he realize, Tatiana, after the fact, did you ever get a sense that he realized, I think that came out, it was meant to be, I'm going to make up something that you could imagine somebody saying, humorous, but did he ever revisit it with you and say, look, that was not right of me.
He said he never meant to like hurt me, but I wouldn't say he like internalized that he necessarily had done something wrong.
So it's the non-apology apology. It's sort of the apology that makes many of us crazy as we work with students and work with their careers. It's the I'm sorry you're upset.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And it got to a point where I'm like, I can't work with this leader anymore. So I basically found another job in another team and moved.
So you managed your way,
I had to
out
do
of
it
and into something else.
Yeah. And, and then it was fine. And like did finding that job, I got promoted, but like not shockingly soon after, I'm like, I'm done with this company. Right. But that was an intense example. And I only share that because it does happen. Unfortunately, I wish it didn't, but it does. And sometimes you have a bad relationship with the manager that, you need to work through and figure it out and find solutions. And sometimes you just need to be like, you know what, I need to leave because this isn't good for me. So that's the other situation I'll share, because it wasn't like the person was like racist. It was like, just a more difficult manager, I would say. And what I say difficult is that he was very different from any manager I had or anybody else like in the team had. Not that it wasn't a bad thing. It's just nobody knew how to like interpret him, understand what we were actually supposed to do. And so like that lack of sort of clarity or feedback or guidance sometimes can be really detrimental, right? Like to the team. So in that situation, I remember just having a lot of conversations with, my manager to better understand where he was coming from and the differences and the gaps that, then either myself or the rest of the team could fill in and sort of help. I learned to ask a lot more questions and really seek to get clarity, have more open conversations with him. And, sometimes I used to think that I shouldn't ask as many questions, or I shouldn't have so many of those conversations, because maybe you would come across like I didn't know what I was doing. But in this case, it really was a good lesson of like, no, we need to have these conversations and talk about a lot, because it's not just me who's not clear, it's like the entire team.
Right.
And through those conversations, I would say that I even got a better connection and perspective to him as like a person, and just how differently wired he was.
How did you address it though?
It was more to like in this situation, he was, I would say, like a creative genius, super smart, and imaginative, but like when it came to like business things, just not his wheelhouse. Right. So I leaned more into our conversations to like talk about the things that he was really passionate about and get his guidance, because again, he was super brilliant in those things. And then just offer to shore up more of that gap on like the business side of things for him with the team. So like really, to me, like the best relationships, like leader and myself, or myself with people in my team, is when we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, and we sort of feel for each other, where we're like, for me, I'm not a good planner. I don't like to plan. Like, if you talk about processes and timelines, I'm like, oh my God, like this is so boring. But some of the best people that I've had in my team is like, they love that stuff. So I'm like, awesome, go for it. And I think that's okay. It's just sometimes when it's not a match and the person is so different, we don't necessarily know how to like manage that and how to have the conversations to either find commonalities or just be clear with one another of like, you know what, I kind of sense that you don't want to focus as much on XYZ. So how about I do that and then help you out?
Actually, what I'm hearing, Tatiana, is you actually do confront it and say, look,
Oh, yeah.
We've got to work together productively. And here's an issue I think we have to deal with. And
Yes.
here's the solution. So you came to the table with a diagnosis and a solution.
Yeah, I have learned that we have to be radically candid with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And really
radical candor. I like that.
Yeah, and there's a book that it's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. She's former Google executive, but really, really good book. And she actually talks about how radical candor is so important when you're like really confronting the situation, but you come from a place of solution, you come from a place of care and compassion, right? Not the fighting, so that we can have a really robust and constructive conversation and move forward. And the opposite of it is when you don't, because you're avoiding the difficult conversation.
Right.
And I think she used the words like erroneous. I can't remember what it was, but it basically you detriment the relationship because you're not surfacing what needs to be addressed. And I think that's true for all relationships, that when you do it with care and compassion, but you have those conversations that can be uncomfortable. And I've seen it go both ways, to me and my manager, but to me and my team too, when having like performance conversations. If I'm so positive that I don't tell you what might be holding you back or where you really need to focus to grow the way that you want to, because I don't want to like upset you, like I'm actually hurting you more than I'm helping you, you know? And I think I played sports growing up. So I think about a coach who's just like telling you over and over again, like kick the ball more this way. No, go back. Do it again. Do it again. You gotta do it again. So like for me, it's just part of it. But I see so many people avoid it, again, both ways and sideways too, with peers as well.
Right.
And then you don't really have a strong foundation for the relationship and the trust with one another.
Right. That's interesting. No, I mean, that was a really thorough couple of sets of answers and perspectives, Tatiana, and I think it's concrete enough. People are going to find it really useful. So thank you. That was great.